Have you ever felt like you're in a constant tug of war with yourself? Trying to do the hard things you know you should be doing? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly why that happens and how you can actually, seriously, rewire your brain to start craving those challenges. I mean, really think about it. You set your alarm, you're full of determination for the next day, and then you hit snooze. Again and again. Or you sit down at your desk, that cursor just blinking at you. Well, that really important work just hangs over your head. If any of that sounds familiar, trust me, you are not alone. We've all been there. We all know that feeling at the end of the day. But why? Why is it such a struggle?
Okay, here is the most important thing you need to get right from the very beginning. You are not lazy. Procrastination is not some deep character flaw. The problem is that you are fighting a neurological battle. See, your brain's number one job isn't to make you successful or happy. Its job is to keep you safe and comfortable. And that hard path, well, to your brain, that looks like a threat, and it's hardwired to avoid threats at all costs.
To really understand this battle, we've got to look at the world around us. Our modern environment. It's basically perfectly designed to keep us stuck. And it all goes back to this classic experiment involving a bunch of kids and, some marshmallows. So way back in the 1970s, researchers at Stanford gave these little kids a really simple choice. They said, hey, you can have this one marshmallow right now, or if you can just wait 15 minutes without eating it, you'll get a second one. It was a test of delayed gratification, and the original study found that the kids who could wait tended to have, better outcomes later in life.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting for us today. We are living in a world filled with an infinite supply of digital marshmallows. That little notification that just popped up on your phone, that's a marshmallow. That food delivery app you can order from in 30 seconds, that's a marshmallow. Every single scroll, every click, it gives our brain this tiny, immediate reward, and it completely hijacks the system that's supposed to help us work toward our big long-term goals.
So we know the environment is kind of working against us. But what's actually happening on the inside? Let's break down the internal barriers that are really keeping us from taking action.
So a psychologist, Dr. Russ Harris, came up with this fantastic framework for this, and it's called the HARD barriers. First, we get H for hooked by our own self-defeating thoughts. Then there's A for avoiding discomfort. We also experience R, remoteness from our values, where we forget why we're even doing this. And finally, D, for doubtful or just overwhelming goals. For now, let's zoom in on those first two because they are the big ones.
The H stands for hooked. Look, our minds are basically reason-giving machines, and they are incredibly creative when it comes to finding reasons not to do something. You get hooked by these thoughts, right? The ones that tell you you're going to fail, or it's not the right time, or you're not in the mood, or it has to be perfect. Sound familiar?
A is for avoiding discomfort, and honestly, this is the biggest driver of them all. Here's the truth. We don't procrastinate on the task itself. We procrastinate to avoid the uncomfortable feelings that come with the task. Fear, anxiety, boredom, self-doubt. Putting it off gives us this tiny moment of relief, and that feeling of relief, it is incredibly addictive.
Okay, so we're fighting our brain's ancient safety instincts in a modern world that's packed with distractions. How in the world do we even stand a chance? Well, the answer isn't to just fight harder. It's to change our motivational fuel source entirely. You see, most of us run on what's called extrinsic or external motivation, things like money, praise, or status. Think of this like fossil fuels. Yeah, it gives you a temporary boost, but it's not sustainable, and it always runs out. What we really need is intrinsic motivation, the stuff that comes from within. This is like fusion energy. It's self-sustaining, it's incredibly powerful, and it never, ever runs out. So this powerful fusion energy is built on 5 core drivers. You've got curiosity, which is that simple itch to learn something new. Mastery, that's the drive to just get better. Autotelic, which is the fancy word for finding joy in the activity itself, not just the prize at the end. Purpose, the feeling that what you're doing actually matters. And autonomy, which is that sense of control over your own actions. When you get these aligned, your motivation becomes almost unstoppable.
Okay. So with the right fuel in the tank, we can start to actively rewire our brain's response to challenges. Let's get into the practical, step-by-step guide for how to actually do it.
The very first step is a massive mental shift. We're all taught to see the pain of effort, the discomfort, the struggle, as a sign that we should stop, that something's wrong. But what if that pain, what if that's actually the feeling of evolution in action? It's just like a muscle.
It has to tear a little bit to regrow stronger. Your mind has to struggle to expand. That pain, that's the price of admission for growth.
All right, this might be the most important part of this whole thing. The root of all lasting change is an identity shift. You don't do hard things because you should. You do them because you start to believe that's who you are. So you have to stop telling yourself, oh, I'm such a procrastinator, and you start reinforcing a new identity. I'm the type of person who seeks out challenges. I do what others won't do today, so I can do what others can't do tomorrow.
So how do we start building that new identity? With action. But listen, it doesn't have to be some giant leap. If a goal feels totally overwhelming, just break it down and nibble away at it. Don't think about writing a whole book. Just focus on writing 100 words. The goal isn't to finish the task. The goal is just to show up and prove to yourself, with evidence, that you are the person who does the work. We also have to manage our brain chemistry, specifically a molecule you've probably heard of, dopamine. That's the motivation molecule. So stop flooding your brain with cheap dopamine from your phone the second you wake up. Instead, try a 30-second cold shower. It sounds crazy, but it gives you a natural, sustained dopamine boost. And practice reframing every single challenge not as a threat, but as an opportunity for your brain to get that sweet reward of growth.
You can literally train your brain to associate pleasure with doing hard things. It's like training a dog. As you're right there in the middle of a tough workout or a difficult task, don't wait until the end to feel good. Tell yourself right in that moment of struggle, this is good. This is what growth feels like. I'm proud of myself for showing up. What you're doing is creating an internal reward, linking the effort directly to a release of dopamine. And over time, your brain will actually start to seek out that feeling. It will start to crave the hard work.
So, you see, it's not about finding some magic bullet for motivation. It's about understanding the battle you're in, upgrading your fuel source, and then actively rewiring your brain's reward system. You have the map now. And that hard path, it's no longer something to be afraid of. It's the only path where real growth is waiting for you.
Ultimately, it all comes down to this one choice. Pain is inevitable in life. You will either experience the temporary pain of effort, of discipline, of growth, or you will experience the lifelong pain of regret, of knowing you are capable of so much more. The choice is always yours. Which pain will you choose?